Hello, everyone. Welcome to our recent graduate panel. We are so grateful that you were able to join us. Today, we will be covering topics including financial planning, student loans, saving, and investing, to name a few. I'm Chloe, and I'm a member of HerCapital's programming team. For those of you who are new to the HerCapital community, HerCapital is a nonprofit organization with the mission to empower women to learn about personal finance and investing. I'm joined by Zabreen, our co-founder. Zabreen, do you want to introduce yourself further?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As Chloe mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of HerCapital, and we're really excited to bring this event to you. As we know, so many members of our community are either students or have recently graduated, and there are a ton of questions you have about navigating the professional world, navigating student loans, salary negotiations, and a bunch of other topics that we're really excited to cover today. A little more background on myself. I graduated about 4 years ago from Stanford. And since then, I've had a couple of different jobs and pivots within my own career. I first used to work in tech. I then moved into finance. Today, I'm working at a venture capital and growth equity firm based in New York, and have faced a lot of ups and downs as it relates to budgeting and saving, finding confidence to invest, trying to approach salary conversations. And we're really excited that we're joined by 3 amazing panelists who are also open and ready to share their experiences of navigating the professional world and what it takes once you do graduate and take that life step post your undergraduate career. So I'm excited to hand it off to them. Emmy, why don't you go first and introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Emmy and I'm actually based in London, and I only recently graduated. It's been about a year and a half, 2 years, and I started working in the retail sector in the investment field, and now I'm kind of moving up and I work for a hedge fund / private equity firm who are both a consultant / manager, and I've definitely had my fair share of obstacles, and I'm just excited to talk about those obstacles with all the other girls today.
All right, I can go next. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Thamina. I graduated from Duke University in 2017. So similar to Zabreen, it's been 4 years. I cannot even believe that. Time flies. But I work as an account director within the tech advertising space for the world's biggest professional network. For my 9 to 5. And then I'm also the founder of FemHive and host of the FemHive podcast, where I support young female professionals feel less overwhelmed in their 20s, because when I graduated from college, there's just so much I didn't know. And yeah, super excited to talk about my experience with you all today.
And I will go last. Hi, everyone. My name is Makisa. I recently graduated from Dartmouth College back in June of 2020. And since then have been working at Deloitte Consulting, where I work as an analyst out of our government and public services practice. Outside of that job, I also work at the Memes Art Initiative, which is a Yemen-based startup that is working to scale and grow the Yemeni creative economy in a sustainable way. And yeah, very excited to hop on the panel here with everyone.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves in greater depth. And thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have this panel. A lot of women may not know how to start saving, when to start saving, how to start investing, where to go to find resources to invest. And especially for many recent graduates, saving and investing might not be a priority given the need to pay off student loans and other debts. How are you allocating your savings, and how do you set aside money for investing? And included in that, what types of investments do you make? Like stocks, bonds, crypto, whatever.
So I kind of I have like 3 goals. I have like a short-term goal, a medium-term goal, and long-term goal. And within those categories, I section off my salary paycheck and allocate certain portions depending on the time frame. And once I hit those short-term goals, so like, for example, one of the short-term goals I have currently is I want to get a nose job. So that's kind of what I'm saving for the short term. But then one of my long-term goals is a house. So obviously I'd be putting more aside for my nose job, whereas I'm putting less towards my house for now. But for someone like me, I don't think buying a house is one of my greatest like goals, because it's more of a liability if you're buying a first time home rather than an investment property. So I'm still kind of figuring that out, whether it's going to be an investment property or not. But I definitely feel if I'm kind of moving those goals into certain categories, it helps me sort out my paycheck and percentages into each of those goals and kind of categorize everything.
I love that. Maybe just to follow up there, I think for me, it's been absolutely crucial to align my financial goals and my money habits overall with my values and priorities in life. But in the beginning, when I graduated, I just still had a very bad relationship with money. So I really had to take a step back first and assess my current spending habits to really figure out where my current habits are and whether they are actually aligned with my values. And surprise, surprise, they weren't. So that's something that I recommend to really anyone. And I think a common misconception that people have is that when you save or invest, like all the fun goes to die because you don't have any money left to live. And I think that just couldn't be further from the truth. I personally love splurging, but only when it really adds value to my life. So I follow my infamous 35-20-20-20 bucket rule. And yes, I know those numbers don't add up to 100, but I'll get to that in a moment. So for me, 35% of my net salary goes towards long-term investments, which includes my retirement account, my company's employee stock purchase program, and other individual stocks. Then 20% go towards rent and bills. I know some of you might be living in a city where rent is really high, like New York City or the Bay Area, for example. I live in Dublin, Ireland at the moment. And their rent is also very high compared to my salary. But I just found a way to live below my means by finding a cheaper apartment first, but then also negotiating rent and living in the smallest room in my apartment, despite having the highest income among my roommates. So I think there definitely always is room for you to spend less on essentials. And then the next 20% go towards short and medium term savings for my top 3 expense categories. Those are the expenses that really align with my values and priorities in life. So for me, that's traveling, good food, and wellness. But for you, it might be something different. That's why, again, I would encourage you to take a step back and really assess what your priorities are. And then the next 20% just go towards day-to-day spending, including groceries and discretionary spending. And then that leaves about 5%, leeway for that occasional Amazon splurge, electricity bills being a little bit higher in the winter months, being lazy in ordering takeout or buying an additional share of a company. So that's kind of my allocation. And I currently invest the vast majority of my money in individual stocks. And I also manually increase the risk level of my retirement account investments because I'm still so young. I feel comfortable taking more risk, and the older I get, I will gradually start to shift to like ETFs and maybe real estate. But for now, at age 26, I'm still fine with taking a little bit more risk.
And a quick follow-up question, actually. Sorry, Makisa, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question, and then we'll turn it over to you for your quick budgeting, saving, investing tips. But I was wondering, Thamina, how do you think, or how did you initially think about picking individual stocks? That's a question we get a ton from our audience, and particularly if you haven't invested before, you're a recent graduate, you don't want to take too much risk. How do you educate yourself on which stocks to pick, and what was that process like for you?
Absolutely great question, Zabreen. So for me, I personally only invest in companies that I know about, and I have a strong focus on tech because that's where I work. I subscribe to so many newsletters. I know what's happening in the industry. I, for example, don't know a whole lot about energy or commodities, so I don't really feel comfortable investing there. I still don't fully understand crypto, even though everyone around us is like raving about it right now. So I don't feel comfortable investing a whole lot of money there. So I stick to what I know, and I know that it's not very diversified, but again, because I'm still young, I feel comfortable doing so. And with my employer, for example, I was mentioning I invest in the employee stock purchase program, which means that I get a 10% discount on the stock, and then I invest 15% of my gross salary each month, which is a big chunk of money, especially accrued over time. But because I genuinely believe in the future of this company, I feel comfortable doing that.
Got
Yeah,
it. Super
that's
helpful. And I'll turn it back to Makisa.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would say I'm in a little bit of a different boat from the two folks who just spoke before me, but I definitely think that there are a lot of similarities between the strategies that we use, in that we have done some thinking and reflecting on where we would like our money to take us in life, and how we can leverage our financial goals to help us just achieve our dreams and the things that we want to pursue in life. So the situation for me at the moment is that I'm currently paying off several thousands of dollars in student loans, which I'm sure is a familiar situation for a lot of viewers out there. So for me, my top savings priority right now, in addition to obviously allocating 15 to 20% of my gross income to my company 401k and my Roth IRA, is yeah, top priority right now is definitely paying off my student loans as soon as possible. Thankfully, right now, the federal student loans that I have at least are in forbearance due to the public health emergency. So there has not been any interest accruing on them ever since I graduated last year. So that's made it definitely a bit easier. But I would say that the main way that I structure my savings plan is, in addition to my personal goals of wanting to be able to retire without having to worry about money, and also just be able to take care of my parents and my family in the future, I was able to just write down in a Google spreadsheet and Google document, okay, what are all of the financial goals that I want to achieve in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 10 years, and how much money do I need to save out of each paycheck in order to get me to achieving that goal. And then in addition to just hard financial goals like paying off my student loans, maxing out my Roth IRA every year, et cetera, et cetera. I was also just doing some reflecting earlier this year on what steps I want to take to financially invest in myself, yes, but also just invest in my personal development. And so one of my goals after I pay off my student loans is I want to start developing a hopefully a very robust travel fund, so that I can just see different countries and travel all around, and not have to worry about finances in doing so, but also to develop kind of a personal development fund. So that would just be kind of a sinking fund of money that I would personally set aside for taking random classes here and there and things that I'm interested in, doing art classes, dance classes, like things that will help me to just explore interests that spontaneously pop up, or just invest further in my own personal development. And so that is something that I know is not traditionally considered to be a savings topic, I guess, but that is something that I personally come up with as a solution to how I can leverage my financial goals to help me achieve my personal goals in the long term. And then with regard to the second part of the question about which stocks and assets I typically invest in, I would say, given the fact that I'm mostly focused on just contributing to my retirement plans and also just paying off my loans on the side, mostly I've just been investing in ETFs right now. And I've also been investing in some bonds, but mostly my portfolio is skewed toward ETFs, just to maximize growth over the long term. But definitely after I pay off my student loans, I definitely want to start getting into retail investing more.
I love how you said that you take into consideration into your goals about your like personal development, like dancing and art. And I think that's so important, because we all talk about, oh, we need to save for a house, we need to save for this asset, we need to save for this expense, etc., etc. But we never actually think about saving for stuff we actually want to do. And I think that's like a topic that we should normalize, that we should put our interests at the top as well, because that financial independence equals mental stability, and within mental stability is like enjoying our life after all the hard work we've done. So love that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Same. I was just gonna say how much I really enjoy that, and I think it's a great take on sort of saving and budgeting and putting money aside. And then still on that topic, I was wondering, Makisa, do you have any apps or websites that you recommend to encourage budgeting and saving? Some stuff that you found extremely useful, not so useful. Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be.
definitely. And other folks as well, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts on these methods, because I know that just speaking with some of my friends and other folks in the HerCapital community, I think that everyone has different methods that work for them or meet their needs best. So for me, when I was in college, also did not really have a great sense of what my financial goals were. I knew that obviously saving was good, spending equals bad, or that was kind of the extent of my understanding of personal finance education. And I felt too scared and intimidated to learn anything further beyond that, other than to just try and save as much as I could. But so for me, back in the day, I just tried to find whatever was the most convenient, accessible method. And for me at that time, that seemed to be savings apps. So I believe I tried Mint, and then I tried other similar apps that kind of robo budget for you and connect to your credit and debit card and checking account, and just automatically categorize your spending into different categories so you can see how much you're spending on food versus savings versus clothes. For me, though, I didn't really find that that was very helpful for me. I did like how those apps had a very visual representation of your spending and how it might align with what your actual goals are. But I think for me, I needed something that was a bit more just concrete, where I would have to manually record down things that I spent so that I can kind of reinforce to myself, okay, I just spent $4 on a latte when I know that I want to save for XYZ. So the system that I ended up just adopting for myself, and the one that I found to be the most useful for me in the long term, has been I basically just created an Excel budget sheet, and with every paycheck that I get, I allocate my paycheck into different categories. So rent, food, student loans, investments, retirement fund, et cetera, et cetera. And with that, I know how much each month I have to spend. And I know that, okay, I have a little wiggle room in this category, but this category is going to be really tight this month. And then every time I spend something, I have a notes app on my phone that I force myself to write it down every single time that I spend something, so that when I do spend it, I have to plug it into that spreadsheet and see, oh no, I only have, X amount of money to spend for this category this month because I just spent that $4 on the latte. So that has been the most helpful for me. I know that some of my friends really swear by those apps that personally I didn't find to be as useful for myself. But yeah, I would love to hear other folks' thoughts as well.
I kind of agree with you on the whole apps, be your own Google spreadsheet. I'm definitely Google spreadsheet all the way. It's good, like at the end of the month, to actually put what your expenses were, why you've gone over them, etc., rather than everything just being automated. Because when it is automated, you kind of let it happen in the background, and you're still not actually aware of what's going on with your money. It's still better, but yeah, I agree with you. Google spreadsheets have definitely been my way to plan out my savings and my paycheck.
Yeah, so for me personally, I also don't really track everything within my discretionary spending, because the way I approach my finance is that I have so many automatic deductions the day I get paid, you know, retirement, ESPP, other investments, my top 3 expense categories that I allow myself to splurge in. And then the remaining money that is left over for like groceries and, you know, the occasional Amazon splurge or whatever it is, like I don't need to budget there. That's just by have already having deducted so much money ahead of time, I know that I'll be fine. I'll be set up for my future financially. So I don't really like to track every single expense that I have beyond that. But what I love doing is tracking my net worth. So all the assets that I have minus any potential liabilities, such as, you know, student debt. Luckily, I don't have any, but credit card bills, for example. So I do that on usually a quarterly basis. Just a simple Excel spreadsheet, total assets minus liabilities is your net worth. I love doing that because I have an ambitious goal of getting to 100K net worth by the end of 2021. So that helps me keep myself accountable. But something that I actually really, really love is compound interest calculators. And on Nerd Wallet, there's a really, really great one. And then on investor.gov, I think I actually prefer the investor.gov one, but that is so motivational for me to just see how much money I will be able to have in the future by investing, I don't know, 500 bucks or 1,000 bucks per month. And like, if you only like change the numbers a little bit, like an additional 50 bucks or 100 bucks per month, how much that can actually move the needle in the future. Like the whole concept of compound interest, if you do not know what it is, please do yourself the favor and look it up, because that's just been the most mind-blowing concept on my personal finance journey. And I think there's a reason why people refer to compound interest as the eighth wonder of the world. And yeah, to me, it's just so motivating.
Yeah, I think it's nice to sort of quantify your goals too. So being able to really see sort of the progression and what that looks in the future, that's definitely very motivating. On that note, for a lot of recent grads, we sort of touched on the topic of student loans, and that of course is sort of a very daunting experience for some recent grads and their top priority. So can you recommend any techniques that have helped you meet your student loan payments in a timely manner?
Yeah, I can take that question first. So for me, I graduated from Dartmouth with about 22K in student debt. And as I mentioned earlier, due to the public health emergency, thankfully there has not been any interest accruing on it yet. So for me, I think something that was really helpful in figuring out how quickly I wanted or I would be able to pay off my student loans was taking my salary and the approximate amount of each paycheck that I knew I would be getting once I started my job, and just kind of planning backwards from that amount. So I knew that, okay, I have X amount of money to spend on rent, necessities, savings, etc. every month. And based on that number, what is the maximum amount that I can comfortably allocate to paying off my student loan debt every single month that will allow me to, feel like I'm making comfortable progress towards paying off that debt in a reasonable amount of time without feeling so saddled by, each payment every single month. So I think something that I would recommend is definitely identify the minimum allowable payment that your student loan provider is requesting that you make. I know for a lot of federal loans, and I'm not sure about different private loan servicers. I did have one private loan servicer, and their minimum allowable payment amount each month was a little lower than what I would have preferred to pay in order to pay off my student loans more quickly. But I would say that's also the case for a lot of federal providers as well. I would say look at that number and use that along with whatever money or revenue streams that you have flowing in at the time to plan backwards from there and figure out how much money you would like to pay off your loans in. And Similar to what was mentioned earlier about the NerdWallet compound interest calculator, I know that there's also a ton of websites out there that have similar calculators where you can plug in your amount of loans that you have and then add the average interest rate on all the loans that you have. And it will tell you, I believe, how much money you'll need to pay it off in, let's say, if you want to pay it off in 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, etc. And then you can also, I believe, on those same websites, you can use those to figure out, okay, if I pay blah, blah, blah amount of money on my loans every month, how long will it take me to pay off my loans if the interest rate stays the same? So that was something that I found helpful in figuring out how much money I wanted to pay each month without breaking the bank entirely, but also making me feel like, okay, I'm making good progress towards paying off my loans.
I think similarly in the UK, I know, like, as a UK citizen, the student loan payments kind of get taken out of your salary automatically before tax. So you think that you don't notice it, but I've been reading a lot and I've heard a lot that actually you should be, like, you should make yourself known about your student loan, especially if you are quite an ambitious person and you're expecting those high salaries in the future and you want to go for the director, CEO kind of roles. We have to pay an interest every year, and I think it's about 6%, and that starts from your first year at uni. So I know that if you kind of stay in the low bracket of salary, maybe yes, over the 30 years, you won't end up paying your entire student loan. But if you are an ambitious person and you are wanting those kind of senior roles, it's just like a piece of advice: find out what your student loan is and kind of start working out if you can start making those payments which are comfortable to you, because you will end up paying a lot more and the student loan company will start taking a lot more of your income, and it is quite detrimental over the long term. And I think the whole myth around, oh, you never have to pay back your student loan in the UK, kind of needs to go, because you do. You really do. So it's just important to be aware of it, maybe not so early on in your career, but when you are getting those promotions, maybe start thinking about if you can forego some more of your income just to reduce that student loan debt.
I think something else that is really important to consider, and I'm very fortunate that through the support of my family and merit-based scholarship, I ended up graduating without any student loans. But a lot of my friends are in student debt, and oftentimes they approach me with the question, okay, Thamina, should I just focus on paying off my loans like as quickly as possible, or should I have a healthy balance between like investing and paying off my loans? And I think, Makisa, you have a great approach where you're trying to really like max out your 401k and your Roth IRA each year, which is fantastic. I think everyone who has student loans should really take a step back and look at the interest rates that they have, because if the interest rates are lower, then it might actually, from an objective financial point of view, it might make more sense for you to invest money in assets that are likely to yield a higher return annually than your interest rate for those student loans. So for example, if your student loan interest is like, let's say 5% or below, the chances of you getting a higher return by investing, let's say, in ETFs like an S&P 500, who is historically returned an annual rate of between 10 and 11% since its inception in the 1920s. Like, I know it's a mental and psychological burden to have student debt, and like, by all means, if you want to just like get rid of it, like, I totally understand, and a lot of my friends are in that position. But just from an objectively financial perspective, it might not always be the best decision to solemnly focus on paying your student loans off.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I definitely agree that sort of taking some time to sort of figure out what your goals are and how you want to pay back in what kind of time. And I think the calculators are also a great resource that recent graduates can use, and students as well, can use to sort of understand what kind of way and what kind of situation they want to pay it off. Um, and then sort of segueing into sort of working and entering the workforce. As a college student, the idea of entering the workforce and starting my career is extremely overwhelming. I feel as if I should have everything sort of sorted out, have my dream job waiting for me once I graduate. What is a piece of advice you wish you had received as a student or upon graduation?
mean, I can go if nobody else wants. I think the biggest piece of advice I wish someone had shared with me when I graduated was that it is okay to not have everything figured out yet. I think too many of us, especially those who are used to competitive environments, I think a lot of us just obsess over having like our 5, 10, 20-year plans. And look, I don't have any problems with setting goals. In fact, I want every single woman to set outrageously ambitious goals for herself and go after them with poise. But you also have to realize that things happen along the way, things that you oftentimes simply cannot account for. One seemingly small event or one person that you meet has the ability to completely change the trajectory of your life. So I think because of that, it's really important to constantly be open-minded, and just embrace the journey and ride the wave.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna have to agree with that. And I think that I was definitely one of those people back in college who just felt so much pressure, mostly, I guess, internally, not so much externally, but so much pressure to feel like I had every single thing in my life figured out. And looking back, I just wish that um, me and all my other friends who also put similar pressures on themselves to have everything in their life feel like um, just completely sorted out and squared away. I just wish that we all would have realized that, it's okay to feel like that. And honestly, once you graduate and start your career, it's going to feel even less like sometimes that you have your act together. And that's okay as long as you just keep, going forward and reflecting on areas that you want to do better in and areas that you want to continue to do similarly in. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling like you don't have your life together or certain aspects of your life together. And I would say one piece of advice that I would give to myself if I could talk to myself back in college would be that I would just say to, yeah, enjoy the process. And sometimes it's going to be hard and it's not always going to be glamorous or easy or, um, it's not going to feel like, oh yeah, like, haha, this is so fun. And yeah, life is perfect and great all the time, but that's just life. And if you can find some way to like, um, kind of create moments of joy for yourself and things that you can look forward to throughout every single day and just moments of reflection for yourself, like that's honestly all that you can ask for yourself apart from just doing your best every day. But yeah, I would say that that is what I would tell my younger self.
I completely agree with the whole pressure thing about what you just said. I put mountains and mountains of pressure on myself at university, towards the end of my university, and especially because I didn't know where I wanted to go, what firm I wanted to work at, what kind of path in my career I wanted to go down. And one piece of advice I would give my younger self is it doesn't matter what company your first company is, it really doesn't. And what matters more is networking in that company and creating relationships in that first year of work. Because, oh my gosh, in my first year of work, I talk to anyone and whoever in my company where I started off. And yes, I'm not there anymore, but it gave me mountains and mountains of confidence. And I created relationships with those people. And yes, I've moved on to another company, but they they helped me. Yes, I might not have found the position I wanted at that company, but they helped me in my interview processes. They helped me with any questions that I had about, their career path. So, just trust the process, enjoy it, don't put pressure on yourself, and network and create relationships and create friendships, because I think that's more meaningful. And yeah, that's the biggest piece of advice I can give.
Amy, I have a follow-up question to that. How, if someone is more introverted or, as a junior level employee, you feel hesitant to reach out to people or send them a cold email to grab coffee or chat, how did you approach networking when it can feel like it, requires a lot of confidence, or not everyone is extremely outgoing or feels comfortable reaching out to maybe a senior level employee? How did you tackle that your first year out of school?
So I created friends who were similar to my age in different teams, which I just went in as, this is a friendship, not a network. And I think that really helps the barrier to, talk to people within their team, because they were just a friend. And then they said, oh, we'll get you in contact with so-and-so. So I wasn't necessarily making that first step. There was a bridge, and it was a friend, it was someone I knew, someone I created that relationship with. And that helped me. Yeah, that definitely helped create that relationship with the more senior individuals in that company. And also, I would say, go to group events, socials, and any drinks that are happening in your company, or any type of. I know it's difficult at the moment with all the virtual activities, and I'm not sure when we'll go back to normal life, but yeah, create relationships and friendships in different teams in the company and create those bridges that way. So that's how I would go about it.
That's great. Thank you.
Thamina, I actually have a question for you. What surprised you the most when you entered the workforce?
Oh, great question, Chloe. And I could actually talk about this for a very long time. But for me, I was surprised by how little school actually prepared us for the real world out there. And I'm gonna be very real with you all now, but I actually suffered from severe post-graduation depression for 2 to 3 years after graduation, where I felt really overwhelmed, anxious, and lost all the time. I cried several times a week, had several panic attacks every single week, became less social. Luckily, I started seeing a professional, and that's literally like, I'm such a huge advocate of seeking professional help. So if you feel something similar, know that you're not alone. Actually, most people who graduate from college go through that weird and challenging transition phase, because just think about it. Up until that point, the vast majority of our lives, we had been students, right? And how are we just like that supposed to establish a new sense of identity that is not tied to being a student anymore? It's tough. It just doesn't happen overnight. And that's actually why I founded FemHive, because I was struggling so much and I didn't want the younger generation of women to go through something similar. Like, we're talking about personal finance today on this panel. Like, nobody taught us in school how to save, invest, budget. Nobody taught us how to find our purpose in life, how to maintain long distance relationships and friendships, how to build our personal brand, how to network internally, how to find good mentors. Like, all of these questions just suddenly like emerged, and I didn't have an answer to it. And for the longest time, I was really lonely, because I thought I was just like suffering by myself, because I had enjoyed my college experience so much. But then I started to have really genuine conversations with the people around me, specifically my female friends. And I started to realize that everyone around me, no matter where they were living in the world, how much money they were earning, how prestigious their employer was, everyone was going through a similar experience, being super overwhelmed and feeling very confused. So that's really what surprised me the most. So to anyone who might be feeling something similar, or who is about to enter the workforce for the first time, know you're not alone. Speak up, be open, be vulnerable with the people around you love. You'd be surprised once you take the first step and share your feelings. You'd be surprised how many people will probably reciprocate that, and you can, join a community of people who have similar experiences and lift each other up. I think there is also a lot of like guilt and shame surrounding that topic, because obviously college graduation is something that we all work towards for such a long time, and it's supposed to be the culmination of years and years of work, and it's this really, really great life event, especially when you've had so many people, friends, family members cheer you on along the way, support you financially, right? Then you shouldn't feel like this when you graduate. You should be happy, grateful. And yes, we are all happy and grateful that we finally made it, but it doesn't mean we cannot also feel overwhelmed and anxious and confused at the same time. So I really encourage everyone to just speak up. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I could just go on and on about this, but I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is extremely helpful, getting another sort of perspective on it, especially since I agree, like graduation, it's sort of everything you've ever looked forward to, but definitely comes with a bit of stress, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed entering a new sort of section of one's life. So we're sort of going to segue into financial goals and planning. Oftentimes, one has a set of financial goals, but is unsure where to begin and how to reach them. How do you set your financial goals, and what helped you plan for the future while in school and then post graduation?
I think the first and foremost is creating a healthy relationship with money, because ironically, as an economics student at university, I was awful. I was so bad with my money. And I think over time, I learned what was important to me. And as Thamina said earlier about lining your values with your money goals is so important. So yeah, just really taking that step back. Looking over your past year of finances, I think is so important to kind of give yourself that shock factor of like, oh gosh, what have I been spending my money on? And, actually finding out where it's been going wrong, and is there any patterns in your spending habits? And, it's not going to be like an overnight thing. It does take a few months to a year to kind of figure out where your money should go and how you're going to allocate your finances. But just looking over what you've done over the past couple of years, or if it was that university mayhem, looking over what happened at university and how, and ask yourself hard questions. What did I do wrong? How can I change myself? And, just have a conversation with yourself, and have a conversation with your female friends. Open it up, like say, I'm really struggling to save money. I'm really struggling to, sort my finances out. What are you doing? Are you going through the same? If you're not, can you help me? Shout out for help. It's so important. There's nothing, I don't know, to be afraid of.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of your points, Emmy. And I think that one of the points that you touched upon is that it's really important to not only reflect on how you want to change your financial situation moving forward, but also to try to find a sense of community in that process and ask your friends, what's worked for them. What do you see that maybe I could be doing better in my everyday life to better meet my own financial goals? And I think that that is something that I really wish that I did more when I was back in college, and perhaps even earlier than that. To answer this question further, I'll just add upon what I was mentioning earlier about just writing down the goals that you want to meet financially, and then figuring out how much money you need to allocate in order to meet each of those goals on a monthly basis. I think for me, while I was in school, I had to work several part-time jobs in order to just meet my work-study requirement, and then also just pay for anything in my educational fees that were not included in my university scholarship. So I think for me, that was tough because anything that was not allocated to school related funds, there just wasn't so much left over. So I think for me, I wish I had just tried to kind of leverage that as much as I could, even though it wasn't, a ton of money that I was making in profit. Just really trying to educate myself more on financial literacy. And also, I so wish that something like HerCapital had existed back when I was in college. And I just think it's really a great starting place and just a place to really continue to build upon your knowledge of financial literacy. And I would highly recommend that if you're not really sure where to go, or even if you are very set in your financial goals and you want to join a community of other women who are also trying to pursue financial independence, like this is definitely a great place to do that.
Absolutely. I can only second what Makisa and Imi just mentioned. Similar to Imi, I also had a really bad relationship with money when I was still in college. I was just used to spending all the money I had with any long-term thinking, really. Because after all, we live in a capitalistic society. So we're always encouraged to spend, spend, and spend, especially as women. Just like think about, like retail therapy. We're just like primed and conditioned into thinking that spending money as a woman is what we're supposed to do. And growing up, unfortunately, we're largely excluded from these conversations around money. I noticed that a lot of my male friends had already opened their investment accounts when they were still in college, because oftentimes they already had like a mentor, usually like a father type of figure, who had taught them how to invest and how to save. But all the women around me my age, nobody had a clue. And a few weeks after graduation, it suddenly just hit me that I had absolutely no clue how to do any of that. Like, what are stocks, what are bonds, like ETFs, like what? So that really angered me. And I was like, okay, look, Thamina, if nobody cared to teach you about how to manage your finances, then you really just have to proactively educate yourself. So that's when I started subscribing to newsletters, blogs, podcasts. And over the course of a couple of months, I slowly started to be more comfortable talking about money. And that's when I also started investing. And I think the gateway drug for me was definitely my employee benefits at my companies. And that's what I really encourage everyone to check out. Like, enroll in your pension plans right away, especially when there is a company match, and if it's tax deferred, which means that you don't pay any tax on your 401k contribution, for example, and but only then when you take out the money when you're in retirement. And then the benefit of that is usually you have lower income or in a lower income bracket, so you end up paying less taxes. So yeah, that really helped me a lot. Actually, I did the math recently because I hit a significant financial milestone of generating a net worth of $50,000 in 2 years on a moderate 5-figure salary. And 38% of that net worth was solemnly associated with me maxing out my employee benefits at my company. And that was like 21K or something like that at a time. That's so much money. It's so much money. And also consider that employee benefits, such as an employee stock purchase program, employee company match, like tuition reimbursement, like education stipend, all of those like perks, they're actually part of your total compensation package. So if you do not take advantage, you indirectly agree to a pay cut. So I think that perspective is really helpful, and has been instrumental in me encouraging my especially female coworkers to start contributing towards their retirement funds.
I really like how you use different resources. Newsletters and podcasts for me have been the easiest to sort of expand my knowledge of financial services and investing. So I definitely agree with that. Before we wrap up our discussion, we have a few questions submitted through social media by our community members. The first question, I'm going to direct it to Imi. How can one stand out as an entry-level employee?
Yeah. So I touched on this earlier, and I think networking is a big factor. And yes, driving yourself hard, doing your job is yeah, it's great. Working hard is great. It's definitely it's not going to go unnoticed, but you know, talking to the people that matter will definitely get you that step further. Another thing that was given to me as advice from one of the directors at my current company, I want to move towards a certain direction in this firm, and they told me on a past experience that they had 2 employees that wanted to sit in their team. They were from that current firm, and one employee didn't get involved in any socials, didn't get involved with any activities in the firm, didn't really try and be a part of the community within the firm, whereas the other person who had gone for the job was involved, went to all the activities, run clubs, socials, all of these activities that are provided at the firm, and that person got the job. And it's because they made the effort to actually get to know the community and be a part of the firm and understand what the firm is actually about, because that reflects on the clients. If you're passionate about the company you work for, your clients are going to see that automatically. So I think not only should you work hard at your job, obviously that's a given, network and get involved in what you enjoy. If there's nothing you enjoy there, make a suggestion to the social committee. If you really want to have like a sports club, a netball club, ask, because I 100% bet you they will have the budget for it, and I'm sure not only will that look good on you, you can take it somewhere. So yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice.
And I think, Emmy, what you're referencing also makes me think of a piece of advice that I was given, which is try to be a team player. So attending those social events that, like, say your manager is putting on, and, making the effort to make a dinner reservation or take everyone out to a happy hour, that goes a long way. If you're doing your job really well, but you're not showing up for team events, people often, will think maybe you're not as engaged or you're not a team player. And, I think showing up for those events, for those social aspects, even just like logging into Zoom happy hours, which I know we're all probably so tired of, but just going that extra mile beyond your responsibility list, I think goes a long way and shows other people, your team members, as well as senior level management, that you care, that you want to be there, and that, the company is one of your top priorities. So I totally hear you on that.
Thank you so much, Imi, for that answer. The next question is for Makisa. How can one approach salary negotiations at entry-level positions?
Yeah, definitely. So I think something that is really key in these scenarios is to do your own quantitative research before you propose your desired salary to the HR department or whoever you're interacting with regard to your offer letter. And by that, I mean that it's really important to look at what other firms that are at a similar tier and in a similar sector are offering entry-level analysts or other entry-level employees, and to look at how that may differ to what the offer from the company that you're looking at is. So I think that is something that I would definitely recommend. And also, in addition to that, know your worth and know that even though it might just be easier to, even if you know that you're not happy with the offer, to just say, okay, sure, I'm going to settle for this amount because, I don't want to rock the boat, or I don't want them to think that I'm not grateful for the offer or something like that. And I think, I don't know the exact statistic off the top of my head, but I know that the percentage of women who negotiate their salaries or even just ask if that's an option is way, way lower than that of for men. So I think there's obviously a lot of, I think, societal factors that place pressure on women to not consider negotiating, and just in general to not know that that is usually an option for different companies. But I would say there's usually no harm in just asking if that is something that can be done. And when you are thinking about the specific kind of counter offer that you want to make the company, you can leverage the research that you do on potential competitor firms and what they're usually offering their entry level positions, in addition to any other offers that you might have received from different companies that either have a higher starting salary, higher bonus, anything of that sort. That um, if you are really, really set on working on a team at company A, but you know that your offer from company B is, slightly more financially appealing, then try to also weave that into your response to the company. And yeah, just make sure to keep that in mind as well.
I think one thing I'd say is, sorry, Chloe, one thing I'd quickly say is, if the worst that can happen if you ask is that you say no, in which case you're literally in the same place that you started out at. So I would encourage everyone, even if it's your first, the first job out of school and you feel really lucky and privileged to even get an offer, just ask. No one is going to look poorly upon that, especially if you take Makisa's advice of doing research and going into that conversation with data and actual numbers of what you've seen. I think the hiring manager or your supervisor will actually look at that as, wow, she looked into this, did her research, and will actually want to go and then talk to the rest of the team about what you're suggesting. From what I've heard, from recruiters and hiring managers, they often keep money on the table. So they'll go in, usually they'll have a band of, say the starting salary is somewhere between, these are totally made up numbers, but somewhere between 60,000 and 70,000, and they'll start with the 60,000. It might mean that you could work them up to closer to the 70,000. And even if it isn't salary, it could be in the form of a signing bonus. It could be in the form of other types of benefits that you would get. So always ask and try to have that conversation. If they don't budge, at least you tried. But again, the worst, they're not going to take the offer away. I don't think that ever happens. The worst that can happen is that they'll say no, and then, you'll try again next time.
I think that's great advice. Thank you so much, Zabreen. The last question is for Thamina. What are some top mistakes to avoid as a young professional?
Great question, Chloe, or to whoever in the audience who submitted that question. There's a few, but I'm going to address one topic that I'm really passionate about, and that's the topic of women and self-promotion. So let's set the stage. Unfortunately, we still live in a world where it is socially frowned upon when women promote themselves, because the character traits that are associated with self-promotion are historically associated with stereotypical male traits, but not with female traits. And women are being punished when they're not gender role congruent. This obviously affects men as well. Gender stereotypes just suck in general, but as a result, it is more difficult for women to promote themselves because we always want to be liked and not come across as too assertive. So we oftentimes then associate our professional successes with externalities. Like, how often have you heard some badass woman hide her badassness behind statements like, oh, but I had a lot of luck. Oh, but I had a lot of help. And the timing was just right. Sound familiar? Have you ever heard a man say anything like that? So if we women don't start speaking up and advocating for ourselves, we really risk falling behind our self-promoting male peers. So I really want all the women out there to start tracking their accomplishments and quantifying those accomplishments. I know this can be really difficult in the beginning, no judgment. I've been there, trust me. But I think especially with like numbers and facts, it's so much easier, because there's this one sentence I love that I picked up in a workshop a while ago, and it says, it is not bragging if it's based on facts. Like, numbers don't lie. And if you have added so much value to your company, people around you should know about it, especially people who have an impact on hiring decisions. Like, contrary to popular belief, accomplishments, unfortunately, do not speak for themselves. And oftentimes, not even your manager knows about all the great things that you're up to on a daily basis, especially when they have multiple people reporting into them. So I really recommend that you track all of your accomplishments, quantify as much as possible. Best you assign them to like the individual pillars or core values of your company. That makes it easier once you approach promotional and performance conversations as well. Track those, and every other week or every month send an email to your manager and let her know that you've done this, and this, because chances are very high she doesn't even know that you've done so much in your day to day. And that then also allows you to prime her in the months leading up to your next performance review or promotion conversation, and will make it a lot easier for her to also then advocate on your behalf for, let's say, a salary increase or a promotion. So please start self-promoting, ladies.
Well, I think this is the end of our panel. Thank you so much for joining us and discussing the many lovely topics relating to entering the workforce and sort of some of the anxieties and fears that come with that. As you all know, please check out HerCapital's Instagram, social media pages for more information. We also have a lot of investing information online on our website. So please don't forget to check that out.
And quickly before we end, I'd love to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Chloe, for moderating. Thank you to our audience for the questions you submitted ahead of time. If there are any topics that you would like to delve deeper into, definitely feel free to comment below. Any follow-up questions, we'd love to do more events like this, and maybe even do smaller group sessions with recent graduates and students. As we know, tackling the workforce can be difficult. Going through that life transition can be difficult, as many of our panelists agreed with. So definitely feel free to let us know your comments, as well as other topics you would like to delve into. We want to make sure we direct programming towards what our community is looking for. And thank you again.